Good afternoon and good morning. My name is Adam O'Brien, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager with SunView Software. Today we're going to be covering 5 ways ITSM can support DevOps. And that with me I have Jayne Groll, the co-founder and president of ITSM Academy. And without further ado, let's get started. Before we dig in to the specifics of today's information, let's go over some general housekeeping. First of all, this webinar will be available shortly after its conclusion in case you, for whatever reason, need to exit viewing throughout the course of its presentation, so that will be found on our Bright Talk webinar channel. Second, feel free if you find this interesting or advantageous in any way, share this with your fellow coworkers or your fellow people that you do work with, and please make sure to check out the supplemental infographic Change Management for DevOps that we've attached to this webinar. And finally, if you do have any questions regarding today's topics or have anything that you want to cover and ask from Jayne or myself, please feel free to use the Bright Talk Ask a Question window to submit your question to the webinar panel. And for today's presenters, I am your host, and my name once again is Adam O'Brien, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at SunView Software. You can find me on Twitter at @TheAdamO'Brien, and we are joined today by Jayne Groll, who is the president for the ITSM Academy and a board member of the DevOps Institute. She is an ITIL expert, certified process design engineer, certified Scrum Master, as well as part of the DevOps Foundation. And she's an instructor for DevOps Foundation, Certified Agile Service Manager, and all levels of ITIL and ITSM. And she can be found on Twitter at ITSM_Jayne. Finally, our agenda today is going to be covering what is DevOps, where we'll take a look and see kind of at a high level what DevOps really is, followed by DevOps and ITSM, leading into 5 ways that ITSM can support DevOps, along with first steps to take towards getting that going, as well as finally covering change automation. And now we have a poll that will be popping up shortly, which will take within about 30 seconds here. Is your organization currently utilizing or investigating DevOps strategies? And you have your answers of either yes, no, or not currently, but interested in exploring the possibilities. All right, we'll give a few more seconds here to get the votes in. All right, and we'll go ahead and close the voting. Thank you so much for all that participated. And without further ado, we have Jayne. Jayne, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending some time with us today. So we're going to talk a little bit about how ITSM and DevOps work together and how ITSM certainly supports efforts to improve the relationship between development and operations. So let's start with the obvious question, what is DevOps? So first and foremost, DevOps is a cultural and professional movement. So unlike some of the other frameworks that IT invests in, such as Agile or Scrum or ITIL, DevOps is really founded in changing the culture within IT. And in order to do that, we have to improve our communication, our collaboration, and the integration between developers and operation professionals. The market is demanding that IT go much more quickly. So DevOps is intended to be able to respond to that accelerated demand by introducing smaller, more frequent releases and by being able to accelerate the release cycle by improving the flow of work from development through operations and into production. So as part of that, we have to acknowledge that there's an interdependence between the functions and a need for cultural improvements. If any of you have been in IT for more than a few years, you probably know that we've grown up to be a very, very siloed organization. We're an organization of specialists. And in order to improve the flow of work, we certainly have to be able to overcome some of the siloing that occurs. I mean, some of that siloing crosses regions, crosses branches, crosses business units. And so DevOps certainly looks to improve that relationship through better collaboration, shared accountabilities, and otherwise. DevOps in and of itself, and you'll see that in just a bit, does not have a single body of knowledge. So there's some really good bodies of knowledge that are contributing to the DevOps movement, but there isn't a single one. So it really does support and leverage agile and lean and service management and other customary or proprietary practices that you have in your organization. I like to think that DevOps is really working to connect the dots between all of the individual initiatives and investment that IT has made in improvements by creating almost like a super framework. And then DevOps does rely on and leverage the power of automation. If we're going to go faster, the easiest way for us to be able to be more consistent and repeatable is to leverage the capability of tools and automation. And I know towards the end of today's presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what are the goals of DevOps? Well, you know, in IT and IT service management, for many years, we've been talking about IT business alignment, business IT alignment. But we need to be able to improve that alignment and take it not only to the next step, but 25 steps above that. So responsiveness is an important piece of it. In the old days, we might wait 18 months before we did a release. Today, we wait about 18 minutes. And so part of the DevOps goal is being able to deploy faster, smaller, more frequent releases. And that'll be according to your release cycle. You may not be releasing 50 times a day, but if you're now releasing once a quarter, maybe you need to go to once a month or once a week or once a day, depending again on the release cycle for your services. The ultimate goal of DevOps is to improve the flow of work across the entire IT value stream. So if we look at the end-to-end from concept through production and beyond, the ability to overcome some constraints and to improve that flow of work is certainly there, and that will also improve the time to market. And again, sometimes the time to market is minutes, sometimes it's days, and of course, sometimes we know it's still months. We can't sacrifice the quality of the code just because we want to go faster. So the goal of DevOps is also to maintain or improve the quality of the code, the products, and the services. And if we do all of this, we will improve productivity. Communication and collaboration is not a byproduct. It's actually an underpinning concept that sits below DevOps, and there are some opportunities, tools, and practices that help us to do that as well. And as you can see in the red text, it doesn't stand alone. It really does depend on practices that you're likely already doing, particularly in the service management space. Again, we need to modernize some of our service management practices, but you know, being agile, whether it's agile software development or agility across the organization, looking at ways to eliminate waste, looking at lean practices, and certainly looking at service management and building it all through automation is really where DevOps is going to be able to succeed. So there have been some studies. Every year there's a State of DevOps report that's produced by Puppet Labs and IT Revolution Press. In 2013, it confirmed that the implementation of DevOps practices increases organizational agility and stability. So it isn't just going faster, it's going faster with more stable services. That statistic has now been confirmed in 2014 and the recent 2015 reports. And if you're interested in getting copies of those reports, they're pretty freely available. But what the reports have confirmed, and they're done through surveys, is that organizations that have started to look at improving their relationship between development operations are much more agile. They can ship code much more quickly, and their deployments are completed 8,000 times faster. Now, you may not have to complete 8,000 times faster, but the message there is that things are happening much more quickly. But if you look at the second set of bullets, they're not only happening quickly, they're happening with much more reliability. 50% fewer failures. So when you're assuming a certain level of risk, right, we're automating deployments, we're looking at concepts like continuous delivery or continuous deployment, and we're still netting 50% fewer failures, there's certainly something to be said for that. And when there's a failure, service is able to be restored 12 times faster. And so if Dev and Ops are working together much more closely, and we'll talk about incident and problem management just a bit, the ability to detect, to diagnose, and to restore or resolve incident problems is certainly much more quickly, much faster as well. So as I've already said, DevOps doesn't stand alone. Now, does that require that you need to have expert knowledge of all of these pieces? No, but do you need to have at least some some common vocabulary, common concepts, common practices between service management, between agile, between lean, and looking at your tool chain, not just within operations or not just within development, but across the entire IT spectrum, the answer to that is yes. When we start to look at value streams, the dev value stream doesn't stop at deployment or testing, and the ops value stream doesn't start at transition. It goes way beyond that. So it's really looking at connecting the practices. You know, we know over several years that development has invested in Scrum for agile software development, and we know that operationally processes like change management or incident management, problem management, service level management have been at the forefront of operational initiatives. The problem is we haven't been doing those together. So DevOps looks to connect those dots, to cross-pollinate some of those practices, to reduce some redundancies. We'll talk a little bit about configuration management as an example of that, but to be able to reduce those redundancies so that we're not only much more efficient, but we're operating as a unit. You know, we are IT. We are not dev and we're not ops. We are IT, and we operate as a single unit despite our different capabilities. So if you look at this graphic, I think this graphic is really interesting because it does show that DevOps spans the entire life cycle of a service, from its strategy, from its concept, all the way through to production and beyond. And you look at all of the different environments, from development to testing, staging, and production. We look at all of the different initiatives, practices, frameworks. You know, IT, we love our frameworks, right? So we look at you know, concepts like continuous integration, where you have multiple coders that are coding simultaneously and committing their work to a continuous integration server every day. And you look at opportunities for when that code is committed, that there's continuous testing going on. So we're not waiting till the end of the waterfall before we start doing testing. We look at the ability to continuously deliver. That doesn't mean you're continuously deploying, but it does mean that you have the ability to deliver when and how it's needed. So you're basically standing up in a staging environment in order to be able to go into production. Concepts like continuous monitoring capabilities have certainly improved. And with that, the ability for dev and ops to look at monitoring, to share those dashboards together, has certainly improved as well. And then you see the idle service lifecycle. You see service design, you see service transition, you see service operation, you see continual service improvement. So they play a very, very important role here, even if they have to be adapted to the modern way that IT is being called to perform. And then you see a concept called agile service management, which is essentially taking your ITSM processes and identifying how much of that process is, quote, just enough, unquote, for your organization to be agile. So you start to look at models and you start to look at different ways that you can operate your service management processes in a much faster, much more efficient, much more agile way. And then if you look at the wedge on the bottom, you can see that throughout the life cycle, the opportunity for collaboration grows. So whereas in development, it may be that's a little bit more of an isolated function, as we get closer to production, the requirement for collaboration, the requirement for shared accountabilities certainly increases as well. So there's a rumor out there that DevOps signals the end of ITIL, that ITIL and ITSM is an antiquated, waterfall-focused framework for service management. But the truth is it doesn't negate it. It actually validates its necessity. Right? DevOps doesn't seek to define or redefine processes. There's a lot of discussion in the DevOps community about change management, release management. You know, release management used to be the process that nobody understood, and suddenly it's in the middle of a DevOps cycle, right? When we look at the delivery pipeline, there's release management front and center. DevOps does create a value stream of people, process, and technology. And for those of you in service management, that should sound pretty familiar to you. And it does rely on process and practices that underpin an entire service lifecycle. And that too should sound familiar to you. It takes ITIL and IT service management to the next level. right? And so part of looking at DevOps is taking what you've already done, and as I just said, looking at how much is just enough process, right? So we don't want to over-process. Bureaucracy almost comes a little organically sometimes in process, but you really want to be able to take your service management to the next level by instilling some agile and lean thinking into strategy, right? Start your strategic initiatives by looking at agility. And it isn't agile software development. It's organizational agility that's really going to help you get to that next level. So if we start to instill agile thinking in service management, otherwise known as agile service management, then we start in strategy and we move that into design and development. And as we transition much more quickly, and we leverage automation capabilities, and we build change management automation so that the act of recording a change is perhaps different than the way you did it 5 years ago, but it's still being recorded, right? The ability to operate and improve your services move to the next level. They're scaled. ITIL has always said adopt and adapt, and never more than today do we really need to look at it from that perspective. So if you look at the formula for DevOps, it's really agile and lean and ITIL ITSM and culture and automation, and all of that results in DevOps. And again, try to avoid this over-branding of the term DevOps. I mean, we're starting to see that emerge as, kind of a super brand. But at the end of the day, it's improving the flow between development and operations. And a lot of that's going to be automated, and a lot of that's going to be adaptive. But at the end of the day, that's what DevOps is trying to do. It's trying to create unity among your IT organizations. It's all about this. And if you've seen the Agile Manifesto before, or if you have not yet seen the Agile Manifesto, this is really what counts. This is what defines organizational agility. And when we start to look at the definition of the word agile, unfortunately in common vocabulary, it has now become synonymous with Scrum. And Scrum is a great framework. It's a great framework. But just because you do sprints doesn't make you agile. And so DevOps does depend on organizational agility, and this is what defines it. We value our relationship and our interactions with people over process and tools. Now, that doesn't mean process and tools isn't important, but it means that we're going to prize our relationship with individuals, and we're going to prize the fact that the software and the services work, and we're going to prize the fact that we have collaboration with our customers, and we're really going to celebrate the fact that we can be responsive to change, and we're going to celebrate that over the fact that we have a really cool, pretty process, and that we've just bought new tools, right? So we want to make sure that the tools and the tool chain support all of the items on the left, and that everything on the right is at the just enough level. How much process and tools? How much documentation do you need? How much do you need contracts, SLAs, OLAs? You need them. Please do not misunderstand that message. But are you celebrating the artifact, or are you celebrating the result? And that's what the Agile Manifesto is trying to put forth. Use the artifacts, right? Use the artifacts as an enabler, but don't celebrate them. Celebrate the items on the left as the result of what the artifacts and your practices and everything else can bring you. So the manifesto says very clearly, there is value of the items on the right. We just value the items on the left a little bit more. So if you haven't seen this, I encourage you to go to agilemanifesto.org, and you'll see there are 12 principles that sit behind the Agile Manifesto, and that is the foundation upon which Agile practices like Scrum were built. But just because somebody says they're agile and, they're operating in sprints, it doesn't mean they're necessarily conforming to this. And that's important when we start to think about service management and DevOps, right? We start to think about service management and DevOps. We need to look at these items on the right and identify how much of this do we need in order to make the items on the left amazing. So having said that, I want to spend the rest of our time really looking at 5 ways that Agile ITSM can support DevOps. And so we're going to look at some of the key processes that your organizations have likely either improved, initiated, re-engineered over the last several years. So, of course, change management. Again, everything that we talk about in DevOps is a change, whether it's 5 lines of code or whether it's a big project, everything results into a change. And in today's very dynamic IT environment, changes are happening in some organizations minute by minute by minute, in many organizations daily, weekly, quarterly, or otherwise. And the scope of those changes may be very different. So you may have services that are being released to you by a commercial provider. You may have development that you're doing internally that supports your web services or other online services to your customers. So how development occurs in your environment may be very, very different. But how change management is handled should also be different. So the days where you can ask for change to be submitted 7 days in advance or 30 days in advance or however, that may still apply to certain types of projects and changes, but in many cases it may not. It may be that change management is automated. And I know Adam's going to speak a little bit about that from the SunView perspective at the end, but automated change management where we're moving through the life cycle instead of looking backwards through the life cycle, where we put in the change, halfway through, a quarter of the way through, 2/3 of the way through the life cycle, is probably not going to be something that's going to be ongoing over the next several years. The difference of what a change record looks like is going to be very, very different as well. So will you have your standard database record? Yes. Might it be populated or auto-populated? Probably. Will your cab still exist? Yes. But will all changes go through the cab? No. And will your definition of a standard change evolve? And the answer to that is very, very likely. In order to successfully achieve DevOps, the definition of a standard change has got to be examined. And so ITSM can support DevOps through change management by adapting its model and embracing continuous deployment or continuous delivery and leveraging the power of change management. Remember, change management is not a technical process. It really is a risk management process, both before the change occurs and after it occurs in case there are resulting incidents. So I was at a conference recently and one of the presenters showed us their change record, and their change record was a running commentary of code. Now, that integrated with other tools so that the database record would be auto-populated, but again, the definition of how changes are handled in the one-size-fits-all is not going to be how I think change management is going to proceed in the future. And again, the definition of your cab may be very virtual and may be limited to those big, very, very high-risk projects that are going to have an enterprise-wide type of implication. Release management. So if you look at this graphic, it's really interesting because it does show continuous release, right? It's build, code. Then we release, test, release, optimize, and operate and optimize. I'm running out of words. But the release cycle, as I said before, release management was one of the most misunderstood ITSM processes, and it's suddenly in the middle of DevOps, where release automation is rising as an emerging practice. We're looking at continuous delivery and continuous deployment. And again, that's a little scary for those of us on the operations side, but being able to embrace that because the automation is doing constant error checking and constant testing, and the ability for DevOps to collaborate in case there is an anomaly is almost instantaneous in an ITSM DevOps world. So again, release management as a process actually now has a whole new identity and a whole new importance. Not that it wasn't important before, but it's become the heartbeat of the IT organization because we have to get comfortable with releasing in a different way than we did before, right? In a waterfall, we went in a very linear mode. In an agile software development cycle, we're going very iteratively. So there are smaller and frequent releases, and therefore our ability to absorb risk and our ability to be able to test and to build and deploy and to operate, but with collaboration, becomes important as well. So your release policy may change, but it's still very important because you still do need to have a release policy. And the testing requirements may change, but you still do need to have testing. So this process now rises where, again, in many organizations, it was change, incident, problem, and service level management that were the primary processes that drove the organization. Now you see release management kind of pushing those others aside as basically being, how do we automate this? How do we manage it? How do we control it? But then as part of the control, how are we enabling as well? Configuration management. So if any of you have been in the IT space for more than 10 years, maybe more than 8 years, you know, in the old days, we used to talk about a configuration management database, and there was this perception that you had to have some big monster CMDB that had all your configurations and they were related to each other, and that the joins would help you be able to detect and diagnose incidents and problems, and you'd be able to assess changes because you'd see all the related configuration items, and that is true. That is true. But the reality was we couldn't manage capture information at that level. And so in 2007, version 3 said, well, okay, make yourself a configuration management system that captured data from multiple sources. And that concept is still very relevant in the DevOps world. The difference is that configuration management is more proactive than reactive. So it starts at the first developer, right, building their way forward. We start to look at infrastructure as code, so the definition of the CI, very, very different. But this concept of configuration management looks now to join software configuration management and IT service management configuration management so that we're building the configurations going forward as we stand up infrastructure, as we're starting to deploy. It's very real time, as opposed to in the older way, we would have done it through discovery, right? We would have waited for it to come into production, and we would have gone out to discover the configuration items. Now we're actually identifying them at the source, at their point of conception, and moving forward into production, and the discovery is really just used for validation and audit. So configuration management on the DevOps side, if you look at tools like Puppet and Chef, and then you compare it to the traditional IT service management configuration tools, there is a synergy there. And a lot of what's happening in DevOps today is not choosing one tool or another. It is very, very API driven. So you might be building APIs between your software configuration management tools and your traditional IT service management tools so that they integrate with each other, and part of that configuration management system accommodates that. So it's no longer them and us. But the ability to know a configuration almost at the point of transition would be fantastic on so many different levels and for so many different processes. Event management. So this is one of those processes that doesn't take the forefront as much as incident and problem, but we know that monitoring and the ability to manage the infrastructure and to identify what's going on, and an event by ITIL's definition is not necessarily something bad, right? It's something that's happening in the infrastructure. So whereas we've had operators sitting at monitors looking at, you know, massive dashboards, in today's DevOps environment, event management takes also a very, very strong place because event management and development are happening simultaneously. There are opportunities for developers and operators to start looking at those dashboards together. There are automation tools that will do that. There's monitoring tools that will do that. And so there's almost like a running dialogue between development and operations, where it used to just be operations monitoring it and then waiting for some alert to go out and then having to reach out to a supplier or developer or someone else in the supply chain. In today's world, they're watching it together. And so there's concepts like social metrics, where they're looking at the dashboards together, or they're looking at different views of the infrastructure or the services, and then being able to communicate together. There's concepts like chat ops, where there's a chat room that's just left open, and developers and operation folks will sit together and actually bring the environment into the chat so they can look at things together. There are organizations, Etsy's one that has very publicly promoted the fact they take 250,000 metrics a day. And how do you manage that? How do you manage against that? So there's some really cool capabilities out there. Again, very API driven, so you can build your tool chain with a lot of APIs between the different tools. But event management now becomes dashboard management, or it becomes monitoring, and not just in some isolated data center, but it, again, all of IT can start to be more transparent about that, and escalation can almost occur instantaneously. Which leads me to the last one, right? Incident and problem management. You can't operate, whether you're in DevOps or you're not in DevOps, incident and problem management is the way to restore service. So while we saw 50% fewer failures, there still were 50% failures, and the ability to restore service has got to be fast, right? The ability to detect, to investigate, and to either restore service through workarounds, incident management, or remove errors through problems is certainly there as well. So again, it's not your mother's ITSM in how incident and problem management are occurring. The records will be there, but the records are really more for the history of what's going on. And so we certainly need to be able to manage against that. And we certainly do need to have service management tools and service desks that are opening those tickets and being able to escalate incidents. But even then, some of the escalation capabilities are really different. You know, you have developers and operators that go into a chat ops room, and they're looking at an incident almost instantaneously. So the point of escalation may occur not only just for a major incident, but it may just be for an anomaly. And it may not happen with everyone, but we may be able to detect more incidents and problems prior to the user detecting it. And isn't that the best way for us to do? We don't really want to use our users as monitors, right? Sometimes we use our service desk and we instill in our users capabilities that they're actually our monitoring tool. And you know, that's not necessarily the way we want to approach it. Will that ever go away? No. But will the ability for Dev and Ops to collaborate much more closely on situations where there is an incident or there is a problem, when there's so many more frequent, smaller releases, the ability to look at a situation on a much smaller scale certainly improves the ability to diagnose what's going on and either to restore service or to remove the error. So again, that cultural relationship between development and operations, and also, I've said this several times, shared accountability is going to be important, because we take away the them and the us. If we're both accountable for the performance of a service and we've just done a deployment, then we're both accountable for the fact that we need to work on any resulting incidents and problems. So it is very, very different. But again, if we can improve that relationship, and this is more than just, I don't mean to be cynical when I say this, this is more than just standing around holding hands and singing campfire songs. This is about enabling the relationship so that we do have shared accountabilities, but more importantly, we are on the spot, able to look at these frequent deployments and be able to manage them successfully to improve the quality of the service and to restore service whenever it's necessary. So again, will you have your standard incident problem records? Absolutely. Will they be as in the same form they are today in the sense of levels of complexity? Probably, depending on the scope of what's going on. But again, the message in DevOps is it's not always a one-size-fits-all. And leveraging your automated capabilities is certainly what is going to be able to take you up to the next level, because that enables the collaboration. It removes some of the manual tasks on both sides of that relationship, so that they can work on those that actually do require some of the manual capabilities. So real quickly, some first steps. look at your agility, right? Start to assess your organization and your processes to, are we at just enough? And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Are we just enough for this process or this service or this situation? Really reduce your handoffs and eliminate your bottlenecks. Simplify your documentation. It should be very, very easy to follow. Look at your technologies and your automation, and as a result of all of that, you're likely going to be able to eliminate rework and duplicate activities. So again, you'll have actually improved productivity because you'll improve the amount of time to work on some other cool stuff. Capture your information at the source. And again, look at the way you capture information and identify, are there ways that you can leverage technology to put it into a standard format but allow the freedom to be able to capture it at different places. My biggest suggestion to every organization, particularly those that are doing agile software development, put an ops person on your Scrum team. Let them work on operational readiness while the Scrum team is doing development. It puts the relationship right there. It's a pretty simple thing to do, and it prepares operations for those fast deployments or for those longer deployments. And then look at enabling faster, more frequent, smaller, right? Think small. We need to stop thinking big. Start thinking small, and that will certainly improve it as well. Look at models, right? One of the really valuable pieces of information within IT service management ITIL is this recommendation that you build models. And models could be for very small changes, and they can be for really big, major changes, or for small incidents versus major incidents. So you can actually predefine some of the procedures where you need more governance, you need more, you're facing compliance issues, or you need a supplier or a different resource involved in that. So you can build very, very simple models that you can automate, and that will enable a faster flow of work as well. And as I said before, really look at your definition of standard changes, right? Standard changes are not necessarily break fix. Standard changes could be really complex, but they have a good track record, and there's a lot of automation that sits behind it. And then start where you are, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't throw the other books away. Don't throw all your tools away. Don't hire a new process development team or software development team. Start where you are, right? Understand where your why is. Why are you doing this? What is your business goal? Get the right people together. Get everybody on the same page. Really start looking at your capabilities. Look at your understanding of agility, understanding of how to adapt service management to the modern age. Really focus on behavior. You can't change culture. You can only change the way people behave. So little by little, start getting people to think and act a different way. Experiment. That's a very, very big concept in DevOps. Be comfortable with experimentation. We say it's fail fast. And so if you can fail fast, then you'll learn from it. Consolidate your gains and just avoid some inertia. So on that, I'm going to turn it back over to Adam, who's going to show us a little bit of some of that automation I just talked about.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Jayne. As you all just heard, Jayne did an excellent job describing 5 areas where ITSM processes can help with your DevOps success. At SunView Software, we have helped hundreds of organizations automate those ITSM processes over the last decade. Today, I would like to touch on one of those processes that we think is critical for DevOps success for any medium to large enterprise, and that's change management. Without a change management automation that can handle the demands of an agile organization, you can't achieve the efficiencies you desire. So I have a very simple recommendation. Make change management a priority. You need to change management automation to help you manage higher velocity change while establishing the appropriate level of control for risk and compliance. This is much like the control tower at an airport. Without the help of an air traffic control, airports cannot achieve the number of landings they do each day. Number 2 is establish different modes of change policies. Once size change models don't work, especially as you start to identify systems of innovation where you want to use methodologies like DevOps to move fast, you need to establish different modes of change based on the types of systems and level of risk that your enterprise wants to take. A minor change for a website probably should be handled differently than a minor change to your core financial systems. And the needs of specific regulatory compliances may have their own policy requirements as well. And last, integrate change into your DevOps toolchain. The goal of DevOps is to deliver customer solutions faster. Traditional change management practices and for many companies will create a bottleneck that you want to avoid. Your change management practices need to be streamlined for certain applications, but you also must automate the capture of change record and artifacts. This allows you to move fast, but be able to have the records that you need for risk and compliance. And we here at SunView Software have listened and have re-engineered our industry-leading change management software to support the needs of a more agile enterprise. Some of the features that we have built into our newest version of Change Manager are multimodal change processes that allow IT organizations to define and automate processes to align with organizational change policies to support traditional ITIL, DevOps, business compliance, and other change processes as needed. We've also added in pre-authorization automation, which streamlines change request processing based on defined and approved criteria, accelerating change processing for fast-paced environments. You'll also find Change Manager dashboard and workspace interfaces that deliver real-time change visibility and metrics for organizational stakeholders and provide specific tools for improving collaboration in virtual CAB or peer review sessions. One of my favorite parts of that we've just added as well is a RESTful API capability, which supports easy integration with third-party toolchain solutions to automate the collection of change records and related information required for processing. And, of course, you can easily integrate with other ITSM processes, whether that be the other ChangeGear suite of ITSM solutions that we offer or any other solutions that your organization may currently use. Finally, both Jayne and I have covered a pretty big gambit of things that we discussed regarding ITSM and how that can support DevOps. If you have any personal experience or have any additional questions regarding the topics we covered today, there's a couple different routes we can go. We have a change management for ITSM LinkedIn group that you can find and join and ask questions within there. You can also choose to tweet to either Jayne at ITIL_Jayne, myself at @AdamO'Brien, or at our SunView Software account. You can also choose to email Jayne through Jayne Groll at ITSMacademy.com or myself at aobrien@sunviewsoftware.com. And that finally leads us to the Q&A session. And while we're having the questions roll in, Jayne, I know you have some very specific things and really cool stuff that you do with the ITSM Academy and DevOps Institute. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about that while we get our questions all organized. That'd be great.
Well, thanks, Adam, and thanks, everyone. So a little bit about ITSM Academy. We are an IT service management, agile, and DevOps training organization. We were born in 2003. We trained tens of thousands of learners. I'm really proud of that as president of the organization. We deliver all levels of ITIL. We do DevOps Foundation. There's a new course, Agile Service Manager, which is basically Scrum on the operational side. So it is the operational counterpoint to a Scrum Master. We have a strong alumni program. And if you are a project management professional, we do offer PDUs for attendance at classes and other events. I also want to talk to you about DevOps Institute. So DevOps Institute was born in 2015. It is looking at standardizing and codifying some of the emerging practices around DevOps. DevOps Institute is not a training organization. It's an accreditation body that's working through a channel of registered education partners around the world. And so at the present time, DevOps Foundation has been introduced with a certification that's associated with it. Certified Agile Service Manager is in production. Certified Agile Process Owner, which is a really cool course, is in production as well. And the Principles of Continuous Delivery will be released in 2016. And again, if you're interested in learning more about DevOps Institute or finding one of the registered education partners of DOI, please go to our website at www.devopsinstitute.com. Thanks, Adam.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Jayne. And one of my favorites that we have here, we have somebody a question that says, how can organizations stay agile while still maintaining compliance standards? This is a great thing that we've been really looking at hard with our Change Manager. And the biggest thing that we can do, we say, is the automations. And then I touched on that briefly with through what we offer with the RESTful API, but really any change management solution that has the agile IT and DevOps kind of strategies in mind needs to have that automation in place. And what this does is it enables you to completely and almost foolproof capture any change records and artifacts from the start of the development process all the way to the code being pushed into production, and then that loop back and forth. So that is one of the biggest things that I found is the easiest way to enable compliance standards. Jayne, do you have any input on how people can stay agile while still maintaining compliance standards?
Absolutely, Adam, and I agree with you. I think automation, which is something in some ways we've resisted, automation gives us audit trails, and it also gives us consistency. So when you look at tool chains, and one of the reasons I think organizations that have strong compliance governance requirements, and even risk, I mean, even, again, there's some risk that's associated with this, it's captured in automation. And so the automation does provide an audit trail. It does give us the artifacts that we need to demonstrate good stewardship of our tools and our services. And also we can build rules into the automation so that the compliance rules are there as well. So I absolutely agree with you on that.
Perfect. Sounds good. And that will take us up to our time limit here. And Jayne, I want to thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us, and you provided some absolutely great information. For all of those that are still viewing, we will have this webinar back up on our channel momentarily as soon as we resolve our time here. We also have that slide share available on our slide share channel, and that's SunView Software. If you search for that, you'll find that ready to go. Make sure to track us down on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll see our URLs right there. And if you do have any more questions or want to find out more about Change Gear and what we offer in regards to change management for the Agile IT, go ahead and go over to sunviewsoftware.com, and you'll find some more information right there. On behalf of Jayne, my name is Adam, and thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.